Immediately, I must say, somewhere in the middle of the years lived here, the head of the family decided to separate Savin and Dmitri, to put up a hut for them near the river, 6 kilometers from the residence. We did not have a good conversation about the reasons for the partition, but these reasons can be assumed. Firstly, there were 6 people in one hut. Secondly, it is not bad to have an outpost by the river and a fishing base. Thirdly, relations with Savin became more and more difficult. And finally, perhaps the most important thing, it was necessary to prevent the danger of incest, which was not uncommon in the Taiga Old Believer sects. The hut was set up by the river. In the summer, Savin and Dmitri lived in it, hunting, fishing, crafts, and a vegetable garden. Communication between the two hearts was almost daily. We went to visit each other. It somehow diversified life. But in the fall, the brothers moved to the family dwelling altogether. And the 6 of us whiled away the long winter again. There was no idleness. The struggle for existence imperiously demanded a share of labor from everyone. And even if there was no urgent work in sight, Karp Osipovich still found it for everyone, realizing that idleness would be harmful here. Taiga didn't let her sit with folded hands, Agafia recalls. There were holidays here. These days they did only what was necessary. To heat the stove, bring water, clean the snow at the door. Earlier, Mother, and after Natalia, on a holiday, to the monotonous potato food, they added something from the storehouse supplies. A piece of meat or rye porridge. Leisure on holidays was filled with prayers with a return to read books, memories of various events, rare in this life, like stunted pine trees in a swamp. It was fun to tell what everyone saw in their dreams. What is the most interesting dream you had? I asked Agafia, believing that she would dismiss the question with a smile. But she thought seriously and said, "In winter, once I had a dream. A miracle. A cedar cone with our temple the size of." Agafia paused, expecting my belated surprise. "Yes, Mitty used an axe to pull the nuts out of that cone. And each from a cast iron. It was, as you can see, the classic of dreams, because Karp in another conversation said, Agafia once dreamed of a cedar cone, believe me. From our shack. The Lykovs world was very small, the hut and the space around it, measured by the day's march. Only Dmitri once, catching up with the Meryl, walked for 2 days. The Velmy has gone far. Meryl got tired, fell, but Dmitri was nothing. This time, for the sake of Meryl meet, the whole family made a trip with 2 nights by the fire. And this trip was included in a series of events that were remembered when, being in a good disposition, they unwound the ball of their lived life. The knots in this ball were an epic with a bear, the fall, without serious consequences, of Karp Osipovich from the cedar, famine of 61, death of the mother, construction of a hut near the river, the year when they put on leather boots, and the day of panic, when they suddenly lost track of time. That's all that father and daughter remembered together. The arrival of people here was a great event. For the younger Lykovs, it was about the same as the appearance of the notorious flying saucers would have become for us. They actually landed somewhere near Zagorska here, in the town of Planenaya, where I am now sitting over paper. Agafia said, I remember that day. It was June 2nd, 7486, June 15th, 1978. The events that worry the world were not known here. The Lykovs do not know any famous names, they vaguely heard about the past war. When geologists started talking about the recent war with Karp Osipovich, who remembered the First World War, he shook his head. This is the same, the second time, and all the Germans. Peter is cursed. He played tricks with them. Food, the Lykovs noticed, as soon as they were launched, the first satellites, the stars soon began to walk in the sky. The honor of discovering this is recorded in the Lykovs Chronicle behind Agafia. As there were more and more fast stars, Karp Osipovich expressed a hypothesis, the boldness of which was ridiculed by Savin at once. Out of my mind I survived. Do you speak the intelligible? And the hypothesis of then 60-year-old Karp Osipovich was that it was people invented something and put out fire similar to the stars of the Velma. The Lykovs learned from the geologists, but they laughed condescendingly. This is not true. Meanwhile, they saw the planes flying high and even relatively low over the taiga. But in the old books there was this explanation. Iron birds will fly across the sky, Savin read. Time passed slowly here. While showing the clock, I asked Agafia and Karp how they measure the time. And what about measuring? Said Karp. Summer, autumn, winter, spring. Here's your year. And the month. By the month you can see. Look, he's already damaged. The day is just absolutely morning, afternoon tea and evening. In summer, like a shadow from a cedar, it will fall on the storage shed. That's afternoon tea. The counting of time in numbers, weeks, months and years, however, was of the utmost importance for the Lykovs. To get lost in time, they clearly realized, means to destroy the structure of life with holidays, prayers, fasts, meat eaters, birthdays of saints, with the account of their years lived here. Time was carefully kept in mind. Each day began with the determination of the day of the week, day, month, year, according to Peter reckoning. The priest who kept track of time was Savin. And he conducted this business flawlessly, without mistakes. Savin did not make any nicks, as was the case with Robinson. Phenomenal memory, some old book, checking the account of the birth of the moon, and the indispensable collective definitions of what day we live in the morning were parts of this everyday calendar. The Lykovs did not lag behind, did not run into the chronicle of life for a single day. This astonished geologists when they asked at the first meeting, "What date is it today?" This amazes them even now, when they meet with the Lykovs. Only once, says Agafia, Savin was scared that he had gone astray. It was a day of great panic. All together began to count, compare, remember, check. Agafia, with her young memory, managed to grab the almost slipping away time by the tail. With undisguised pleasure, Agafia explained to us the entire system of accounting for running days. But people, accustomed to the information service, watches, often service calendars, of course, did not understand anything, which gave dear Agafia a completely legitimate pleasure. I ask you to share these videos in your social networks, using the buttons under the video and subscribe to the channel. I ask you to go and watch other videos about Agafia Lykova, which you now see on the screen in the end screensavers.